Integrity Window Installation อย่าไปมุ่งลูกคือเขาว่าเจเนี่ยเจ้าเขาสังมินนิโซตาไปเจ้าเขาลุยองรู้เข้าใจเทียสอดเจเทียวอเจแต่ชินเอาไปมุ่งเขาโปรแกรมสลีปเล่าพาดอลลาร์ลอป้าก็เทขอเชิงเดอก็มาลิวอลีเทตอกก้าก็ลงก็จะเข้าใจตาเหลอก็ยเซก็จองเกฮีอินดาสุดสลุลียก็จะเข้าใจกูเลยอูเดตุสต้องโจชีโปรเปอีอีชีอีโจชีโปรเปอีอีชีอีโจไปเจ้าเขาลือไปจัวว่าเจ้าเขาสังมินโซตาซึ
The reason that I host this event is mainly provide information and get you connected with the agency. And it's important because information leads to the key for your endeavor, whatever you strive for. You know, lack of information can put us behind. And this is a very important issue. And I know, and all of you know that it actually, before we passed the legislation, we already had influx of Hmong community moved to Oklahoma for that opportunity, or to Northern California. And I so much want all of you back home, back home to live in Minnesota because of this opportunity. But I want you to take the step, but being more informed instead of just going to it blindly. And there's rule and regulation too. So I know that this event is predominantly Hmong, and we're going to use English mainly, but you can speak Hmong or ask questions in Hmong. I'm here to help you interpret, and if anybody that prefers speaking Spanish or Somali, we can take a little time and have it translate as well to people on the panel here. I will conduct this meeting predominantly in English, but I will accommodate and translate anybody that speak Hmong, Lao, or Thai. Those are the three languages that I know. And Nyob so tu cứ mẹ tô nó khá chỗ của tại bên mỏ sang bảo chàng của tôi chỉ nửa tại bây giờ tôi chống bảo lên nó ha của chỗ sáng tại đây cậu tại lên tên đó sư đây cái Hmong TV nó mà lấy trang tại chỗ số trái chỉ không sang cứ mẹ tô nó khá tao biết tại khá tao biết là khó cứ ô event nó do là ha khó cú sa mẹ cú sa bảo lên chàng bên mà trả kế lục ban chỗ mẹ cho yang tận đây. And I want to also thank our media, the Hmong HBC TV, the Hmong TV Network, and Bali Talk Show, Twin City News. And also I want to thank Mr. Chow Her for bringing audio, his home audio studio, Mr. Chow Her. Why don't we give them a round of applause, right? And, but I want to shift all the attention to our guests today. I'm your state senator of the East Side St. Paul. I contribute to passing the law on legalized cannabis. But folks that are next to me here work hard on the issue. And mainly all credit go to the leadership of Senator Lindsay Port. She's here tonight. She's from Burnsville, Minnesota. At the same time, she's also a friend of the Hmong community. Her history goes back to Madison, Wisconsin. She born and raised in South Dakota, but her adult life has been in Madison, Wisconsin. So in terms of, she's also very familiar with the Hmong community, and we have great conversation. We have a connection of friends too in the legislation in Wisconsin legislature. We know each other. So thank you, Senator Lindsay Port, for being here. And she's the chief author of the bill, and I will pass the mic to her, talk a little bit about some of the equity portion of the bill. I will not go detail and explain it, but later I can translate to those of you who may not be clear, and I can reiterate that to everyone. So our also guest here with us is Marone Milliken, Director of Outreach from the Office of Cannabis Management, right here. And they're the one that will set the rule. They're the one that will implement the tax that we pass in legislature, and perhaps licensing too, right? So this is the reason I want you to connect, because I can only do so much as a state senator. We're make law. We're not the one that's gonna work with you on the details. So that's why I invite them here, and thank you for making the time. Also, maybe later, Sophia Lineger, Director of Government Relations, will be here with us too. And Charlene Breiner, Director of the Office of Cannabis Management, will be here as well. And then we also have Department, let me go down to Department of Agriculture. We have the Commissioner himself, Tom Peterson, a good friend, is here. And let's see, Anthony Cotile, Section Management, he would be talking about hemp production and hemp growing and the difference between hemp and cannabis. And then we are expecting to have presenter from Department of Employment Economic Development, Nathan Radner. When he's here, just come right on and speak. So he can talk to you about the grant that's available to you. When I'm sure when Senator Port talk about the legislation, she will probably gonna talk more detail about the funding, the equity portion, the grant, and such. So thank you all for coming, and I want to pass the mic here to Senator Pork, and then later on I want ample of time for you to ask questions and ask us harder questions. Earlier, as I walk around and talk to people, one person said, what if I apply for license, or if I run into any difficulty, who should I call? I said, you can always call back to me if you run into a problem, because we will change the law to accommodate you. That's what makes this country wonderful and help new Americans like ourselves to be successful. So I'm going to pass the mic to Lindsay Port. Let's give her a round of applause to be here first.
Hi, everyone. I am Lindsay Port. Really, thank you very much, Fong, for inviting me into your community to talk about this. I am really honored to have been the Senate author of the cannabis legalization bill, mostly because as the chief author, I was able to make sure that our two main priorities stayed at the center of this bill all through a very lengthy and complicated process of passing the law. And those two main components were, one, to begin to undo the harm that had been done to communities through prohibition, particularly communities of color, with ensuring that expungement was not just the center of the law, but that we were the first state to make expungement automatic. So folks did not have to figure out how to do it, but for most low-level offenses, it automatically happens to start rolling back some of that harm that the state has done through prohibition. The second piece was that as we set up an industry, we wanted to ensure that social equity was at the center of it. And we're not the first state to try to do that. As we've had the, I guess, pleasure of learning from the other states who came before us, a lot of them have tried to put social equity at the center of their laws, but not many have been very successful at actually achieving equitable outcomes. And so as we wrote the law, as we're continuing to look at implementing the law, we're continuing to think through all of the implications that different rules have, that different timings have, to ensure that community, really community-driven engagement in this industry is what leads us here in Minnesota. And we're really focused on doing that in a couple of ways, which as a legislator, I get to speak at the beginning and be all excited about a law, and then I get to go pick up my daughter from ballet while they answer all the hard questions. But we are, hey Nathan. There's a couple of areas where we're really focused on ensuring that community is able to engage in this industry in a way that's meaningful to you. We knew in Minnesota that we have an incredible legacy of Hmong community, particularly, that has a cultural really a cultural connection to agriculture, to farming, to growing from our land. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't just understand that that might happen somewhere, but that we made space for exactly opportunities like this, for us to come out to community, to connect, to help engage, because frankly, you all are the future of the cannabis industry in Minnesota. And we are really focused on making sure that's true. But it's only true if we can do this together, right? It's only true if you have access and your questions can be answered and you have a real opportunity to get not just licenses, but licenses early in a way that allows you to help us build the kind of industry that really looks like Minnesota. So that's a huge piece of it. And I was in conversations today with the Office of Cannabis Management, and we've been working on a policy potentially to do sort of an early mover cultivation to get seeds in the ground earlier that would have required us to sort of put a hold on some of those social equity goals that we have. It would have required people who have more money, people who have more access, people who are able to work the system to be able to be first in line. And so we made the decision today with the Office of Cannabis Management that we are not going to move forward with that. We would rather move slightly slower and know that our core goal of having social equity at the center of our industry is actually able to be true. We've learned from every single other state that has tried to move faster, that in order to do that, they've had to sacrifice equity. And that's just not the principle we want to move forward, and we understand that that might slow us down a little bit, but we'd rather do it right than have an industry that just doesn't hold our core values true. And as far as upholding those core values, we can only do this if it's accessible to people, right? And so that is where the grant programs that Senator Herr was talking about really come in. We have a number of grant programs that we codified with this bill. One of them is a Can Train program to help understand the business around the cannabis industry, to get the kind of training or answering questions about how to start a small business, how to do all of those, whether it's loans, whether it's getting a building, whether it's a lease, whatever the questions are, to really make sure that folks have programs that can help provide that information. We also have a Can Grow grant program specifically for communities of color, for new farmers, new American farmers who are interested in getting into the cannabis industry, to help with things like both learning the industry and the types of equipment that you will need, but also making those first investments in land or equipment, things like that. It's going to be a really critical program because we will need cultivation to get up and running pretty quickly. We also have a Can Renew program. This is the program I'm most excited about. I sort of thought we would have a lot of difficulty passing this through the legislature, but no one ever asked me about it, and that was fine. I was happy to just let it keep going until the end. And really what it is an ongoing, starting in year 2027, $20 million a year investment into communities who have experienced disproportionate harm from cannabis prohibition. We know that means communities of color. We know that means communities that suffer from poverty. And those communities can come together and put up an idea. It does not have to be cannabis related. It's really, what does your community need? What are the investments that you need to be able to thrive as a community? And it is an ongoing, in perpetuity, the program never ends, $20 million a year investment back into community to make sure that as this industry is setting up, you all have a voice in how the revenue that comes in from this industry is spent, and that it's actually spent in your communities. And so we've had some great work. Senator Susan Pa has worked with me on that, and making sure that there's also a youth engagement portion of that, so that we're investing in our next generation. I could talk about this all night long. I won't, because I know people who have answers to questions are here for you. But I just want to say thank you so much for your interest and for coming out. We cannot make this successful if it's one-way conversation. We can only make this successful if we do it in partnership. My office door is always open. I'm just down the hallway from Senator Herr. We cannot wait to stay in community with you, and if you'll have me, I'd love to come back this summer and do this again as we continue to learn more information, make sure that we are working together as community. Thank you so, so much. Oh yes, one other thing, and I'll let Sophie, who just walked in here, probably dig into this a little earlier, but the one piece that we are completely set on with the program, with the licensing, is that social equity applicants, people from communities of color, communities that have been more harmed, new Americans, are able to not only get their own sort of licensing pool, but they will get first mover access, so those licenses will go out earlier than the general licenses. We want to make sure that not only do social equity applicants have access, but that you have early access to get in, get your businesses set up, and help drive the industry in Minnesota.
Good hand of applause to Senator Lindsay Port. I'm gonna just sum up what she said here in Hmong. Nếu tôi hàm chỉ tại social equity nó thì cho khuôn sọn vậy nè, thì bố sáng bố có sai của một cái danh tiền của cho nhớ cho khuôn sọn vậy tàu license ổn định cho bang bạc nữa mà, thì cho khuôn sọn vậy thì trong lại East Side và North Minneapolis và Frogtown thì nó mỗi khó dạng từ rồi bao, sau đó tôi có training grant program. Nó thì cho non-profit, ya mấy một công hữu nó thì nhiều mấy cho nhà tôi cho mấy lúa mấy apply tao cho lúa khá tôi này cho mang hát nữa ha, thì cho chỉ bao nè thì nó ya một cho công hữu lại cho nè lúa khá mấy lúa lang lúa, sau đó nếu một có can grow program nó chỉ lúa bang mấy cho cứ lang lúa nó có do ha, nếu một can renew ha nó thì can renew program nó thì cho federal nhiều một lên nên có phang mình lên cho lúa帮助咗就看佢做嘢，人知啲名路呢，啲我路呢嘅就忙咯，呢時忙啲呢即就路揸路呢下嚟攞先係俾我哋做嘅呢，多就俾談咯。Then next I'm gonna pass the flip to agenda here and pass the mic to the Office of Cannabis Management, Sophia. Sophia is here, so Sophia, you can talk a little bit and. Then we can have Q&A later after everybody talks. Okay.
And I'm actually going to have my colleague Marone go first, and then I'll go second, but we're both here from the Office of Cannabis Management.
And hi, everyone. My name is Marone Melican. I'm the Director of Outreach here at the Office of Cannabis Management, and I just want to first by thanking you guys all for being here. I think that this is very telling of the role that I play, is being able to actually be in community, speak with real people, that essentially like this bill, I would say, was really intended for, right? When they talk about the reparations or repairing harm within communities that were over-policed or that were historically harmed because of cannabis prohibition, oftentimes it looks like a lot of communities like ours. And so being able to be here within community, this is my neighborhood, I'm from the East Side, and so it feels good, it feels like home, and I'm just grateful that I'm able to be in front of you guys today. Just to kind of get us started, I was hoping to just talk a little bit about like who we are at the Office of Cannabis Management and how we got here. I think Senator Port did a great job of really talking about the legislation and how honestly incredible it was to pass something like this. We're not the first state. We have so many to learn from, but I want to say that we're going to do it best so far. And I think that all the folks that are with me here today, really value and really walk within equity. And I want to say from the Office of Cannabis Management, so many of our decisions are really centered in that, and wanting to make sure that we're not veering away from that, that we really move with what the intention was of the bill, and we're thinking of those people with every decision that we're making. And so just to share a little bit of who the office is specifically, we essentially are the chief regulatory office for adult use cannabis across the state. And so we are the ones that are basically implementing the bill that was put in place. We're the ones that are building the infrastructure for licensing and the regulations. We are looking at all of the pieces that were from the bill that were essentially designated to rules, and essentially launching the rulemaking process. And just to kind of explain a little bit about what rulemaking is, I think my easiest way of explaining it is it's really the teeth of the bill. Like, the bill had so much incredible information in it, but then you have to think about, how do you actually implement this? And what are the rules and the protocols that people have to follow in order to actually participate in the industry? Whether it is the labeling and the packaging, whether it's around like how they in fact like plant the seeds. Like, you'll hear from my colleagues that this is not a easy industry, and I'm sure many of you know this as well. Like, it is, it comes with a lot of costs, and it comes with a lot of just like being essentially very careful and making sure that, you know, we are doing it right. Because when you think of cannabis, comes in many forms, but for some people it's medicine, and so it's something that they're putting inside their bodies. For others, you know, they consume it in different ways. And so as a result of that, Minnesota, just like many of the other states, is really committed to doing it right and making sure that we are launching a very safe market, just as much as we're doing it equitably, and just as much as we're doing it so that it's really supporting the folks that we think that it was intended to really support. I'll say one last thing about the bill itself. One thing that I loved is that it was very, I'd say, catered to, like, how do we think about Minnesota-grown folks? Like, how do we think about the folks that are here, the small businesses, the farmers? How do we make sure that they have an advantage within this system? And I think that that's the way that we move at the Office of Cannabis Management in all of the decision-making that we're doing as well, is recognizing that there are people here that are very qualified, that can lift this and that can enter this industry, and why don't we give them a chance? And so it's very exciting to be able to start something new. But to share a little bit just about the law, because I think it's also helpful when it comes to just the context around cannabis, is effective of August 1st of 2023, essentially it was the full decriminalization, which essentially allows the possession, use, and home grow of cannabis for people that are over the age of 21. Oftentimes I hear within community, it's folks saying, oh, adult use cannabis is legalized. That means that anybody can use it. Folks often even think that, oh, I'm over 18, I can participate. Very much so not the case. It's very clear that it is designated for folks that choose to use it being 21 and older. And so I think it's important to call that out, because just as much excitement as there is also concern from different folks, and being able to kind of address that from our side as well, and recognize that there are state agencies that are working to ensure that we are protecting youth and children, making sure that we are thinking about how do we ensure that the use isn't making its way into schools and such. And so it's kind of a catch-all of making sure that as we stand up this industry, and that we are repairing harm within communities, and that we are finding opportunities for people to gain generational wealth, that we're also protecting our children and our youth and people that could essentially be vulnerable to cannabis as well. Within the law, it does say that you are able to use, possess, and transport cannabis paraphernalia. So that's kind of, I think, examples of that could be like the items that you see related to cannabis, such as like the tools and such. You can transport, or you can possess or transport up to 2 ounces of cannabis flower in a public space. You can possess up to 2 pounds of cannabis flower in a person's private residence. And so really being able to kind of understand, what do those look like? While the law did say that adult use cannabis is now legalized, it's also very important to know, what can I have at certain points in times, and what can I not? What can I be carrying with me? Because even with this, we still have to protect ourselves and make sure we're protecting community along the way. I think another piece, because I know that there is a lot of interest when it comes to the home grow of cannabis, right? There are a number of people that have already entered into that industry. And one thing to just be aware is that we do allow for the home grow of cannabis. However, it's, of course, a person that is over the age of 21, but they can grow up to 8 cannabis plants with no more than 4 of those plants being mature flowering plants. The other thing to just keep in mind is that it has to be in an enclosed space. So it can't be something that, like, you know, your neighbor across can just be able to take a look at. And so recognizing that there are a lot of complexities with that too. I think it's important to always know that, you know, we don't want young people to have access to it because, you know, it's not meant for them, and we don't want that it entering into their bodies at such a young age. And so really looking at like that idea of it being in an enclosed space is really a safety mechanism. And so I think that's just kind of an important theme when we think about OCM and this entire industry, is thinking just as much as we want people to benefit from this, we want to make sure that they're doing it safe and that they are and doing it essentially efficiently. There are also a number of questions about, you know, where can I use cannabis and where can I not? So again, it can be used by people that are 21 and older on private property. However, things to always keep in mind is thinking about, you know, if you are living in a multi-unit home, you know, that comes with its own circumstances, or apartments and such. Many apartments have restrictions that are put on whether, you know, people can participate in that. It's also recognizing that, you know, even within the confines of like an apartment, there are other folks that also live in that space. And so also things to keep in mind that I think is really helpful for people to know is that it can't be used when operating a motor vehicle. So folks driving and consuming is, you know, still something that is prohibited. And then thinking about it when, you know, in the workplace as well, it's not something that can be consumed when operating heavy machinery. Even when thinking about like our school buses and such, people that are taking our children to and from school are also folks that are not able to be consuming. And so just recognizing, and I could go into full detail about all of those different pieces, but I'd rather kind of be able to share that with you guys afterwards, and just defer you to our website that has it very clearly outlined. But I think ultimately it's recognizing that with the legalization of adult use cannabis, there are still limitations to it, and we want to make sure that people know those just as they're entering this industry and if they're choosing to partake in it as well. I think I will maybe pause there just to kind of talk a little bit maybe about our legislative side of things and some of the proposals. I think Senator Port talked a little bit about where we stand around equity and some of the things that we held because of equity, and I think it's just a true testament to what our office believes in. So maybe I'll kick it over to Sophie to speak.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Sophie Leininger, and I work as the Government Relations Director with the Office of Cannabis Management. And so in partnership with Marone, we have been trying to get into many rooms like this as possible, because as a new state agency, maybe you are familiar with our other state agency friends who are up here and the over 20, but we are a new state agency, which means we're also strengthening and increasing our number of staff, because we do want to be under Marone's direction and our outreach team. We want to be accessible to Minnesotans, and just like Senator Port said, dialogue with state government and with community absolutely matters, and we would like to also be able to do that work.
And so we have my daughter. Thank you all. They'll answer all the hard questions.
Yes, thank you, Senator. So yes, we want to be just as accessible as is a priority for all Wallace-Flanagan administration agencies, and so we also acknowledge we're new, and you may not know our website yet, you may not know our faces yet, and so we want to be out there and want to keep making these relationships. And so part of that work as a new state agency, as Marone said, we are tasked with implementing the bill and that our legislative partners passed. And so part of that also comes with, as we have entered, we are now near the end of the current legislative session, but when we entered this legislative session at the start of this year, we brought forward a series of recommendations legislatively that we put in front of our legislative partners to really strengthen the intent of last year's bill and really grounded in what do we need as an agency to operationalize, if that's a verb, the bill into turning it into a real life regulatory framework. What do we need authority-wise for our agency, and what can we do to strengthen the social equity provisions? And I know Senator Port mentioned it, but one of those things was staging the way in which social equity applicants will access our licensing system. And so as we stand up the agency and as we stand up the regulatory framework through the rulemaking process that Marone mentioned, we're also developing that system for applications. So we are not currently open for applications for licensing, but we're preparing that. And so part of that means what we would recommend is early mover status for those who qualify for social equity status. And so that means we would run that process. We have proposed to run that process starting as soon as we are done with session this summer and into this fall. Our application and licensing process, I just want to name this, it is lengthy, but that is, I think, an important piece, because when we're talking about a cannabis industry, we want to lead with health and safety and following good standards of operation so that we have a safe product, so that we have fair understanding of how testing things will work, and so that we have the structures in place for facilities to be run well, and for this industry to be trusted by folks and to be somewhere to go. And so it is important that we do the due diligence in the application process. And so while it is lengthy, it is also something we are working on and I'm sure Nathan could talk about this too, about, technical assistance to work through that process. We want it to be the very happy medium of accessible while also holding standards for good operations. And so that is something we believe we can do with both goals in mind. And so our legislative recommendations and our bill that's currently moving through the Senate and has passed off the House floor so far does that. It creates a mechanism for us to move social equity applicants first. It also recommends a proposal in which we change the ownership requirement for social equity applicants. Currently in law, it requires 100% ownership. We, knowing that this industry is capital intensive, it requires a high level of capital in some instances to operate. We also want to ensure that folks under social equity status have the same opportunity to partner with people that people not in that status do. So we move the ownership requirement from 100% to 65%. So still maintaining a high threshold of ownership and control. I think the national average is somewhere from 51 to 55, so staying higher than that to maintain the intent, but still allowing space for partnerships and deals and to not allow and not to limit social equity applicants in that way. Similarly, currently a applicant would be required to have property secured upon time of application. What we have learned from other states is sometimes that poses a real risk to applicants in a way of requiring that at time of application with no assurance that we move to a license. That's a big financial risk to take on a property, and so instead requiring that later down in the application line. Not requiring it at the start to not have folks have that take on that risk with no assurance of that license as we move through the process, and instead later down. So those are two examples of recommendations that we believe move us in a way that makes it closer to the goals and intent of how we can move it forward. But I will say, as any good bill on the floor, it's not law until it's off the floor. So seemingly as we end near of session, and I'm sure Senator Herr will help us with this, we also want to be very clear in how we come out of this session with what is law. Maybe we heard in the news certain bills were proposed or certain things, and so we want to be clear in our outreach of what actually comes out of session, what is in the law, what is the system we will be implementing. And similarly, as we come out of this legislative session in the next few weeks, I think it will also help us get clearer on more information about when we are going to be open for applications and how we move through that process. And then similarly, as an agency, I know it's early and Senator Hur is probably going to laugh, but as we prepare for next session, agencies in the summer and in the fall also really want to prioritize engagement with folks like yourselves and rooms and tables across Minnesota about what are other priorities heading into the next session. And so continuing the conversation, and maybe you're not interested in a license, but you're interested in the community renewal grants that Senator Port mentioned, or maybe you're interested in education and outreach related to youth and prevention and substance use prevention. So I think there's many ways and levels that we can focus on too, and as an agency we want to be responsive to that and be good partners with our other agencies. So that is there is quite a bit more in the bill that I'm happy to cover later, or ask questions or answer questions about, and also happy to share to where more of a status of where we're at. But I'm sure Senator Hur can help us all with that too as we move through.
Well, thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Maron, for your presentation. I'm going to sum it up in Hmong, and I do have a little question, question, a little advice, a suggestion for you too. In Hmong, Hà Nội Hmong mình chỉ bố tôi hành đầu, tất nhiên cũng hay dùng gì chứ, tại ý tụi tôi này để bố ngang lại ounce, hoặc là ý lúc chế này để bố cái giá lại pound, hoặc là mấy mua license cứ mấy giờ transfer nó để khó mà sai trở lại chú chạy, ý lúc chế thì để bố cho lại gì cho, ha block cho nó thì của block cho họ lưu cho lưu ở tờ băng là bố cho chạy họ ha. Cứ họ cứ tại dù biết nó thì cái license nó thì lúc summer nó cho biết mà ok chạy xe là chăng, chú thằng đó cũng mà chăng tờ ha. And when there's dates or deadlines accepting application, do share with my office too. I don't mind being an information outlet. But at the same time, I don't want to put you on the spot. I have conversation with Senator Lindsay Port about it too, that we need to be inclusive as much as we can. The agency, the cannabis management, and I don't know, and I don't want to go on whether counting, whether it's representing these folks here. And I just do a social media posting to the east side, and this is the people that show up, and this is the people that put me in office, and this is the people that are very excited to grow. So if we move ahead without including them, we're at a disadvantage. And I know I already expressed my discontent as we formed the board of cannabis, that we don't have anyone of this community, let alone even I, the legislator. By the time I know, the deadline's already gone. So if someone who are really at that level and missed the deadline, imagine the people will miss the deadline as well. That's why it's, and I organized this event mainly to inform, but also because requests from the community want to hear about it. So I just thought I'd put a little word of criticism there for your intake. So next we're gonna move on to Department of Economic Development, Nathan Ratner. So go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Senator Hur. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Nathan Ratner. I'm in the Office of Government Relations at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, Hao-Pei Lee, who is also at the Department of Employment and Economic Development and is a great resource. I am here because I am coordinating the development of 3 grant programs that are housed and that we will administer at the Department of Employment and Economic Development, or as we call it, DEED. They are the CAN Navigate program, which will offer grants to provide technical assistance to help applicants navigate all of the elements related to launching a cannabis business. CAN Startup, which is a grant program that will offer relatively small loans to micro businesses in the legal cannabis industry, and CAN Train, which will offer grants to organizations to do workforce training within the cannabis industry, as well as scholarships to individuals to participate in workforce training programs to enter the cannabis industry. We are also collaborating with the Department of Agriculture as well as the Office of Cannabis Management on a fourth program called Can Grow, which is very interesting in that it is for existing farmers who are interested in entering the cannabis industry to receive both technical assistance as well as small loans to support that transition. We are developing each of these programs with an emphasis on social equity and on supporting small business development. We operate with the similar principle as the Office of Cannabis Management in that we want to see those communities who were disproportionately harmed by cannabis prohibition receive disproportionate support in entering the legal cannabis industry. We also recognize that there are communities that have been harmed in other ways that also deserve a unique opportunity to enter and thrive in this industry. In terms of how we are developing these programs, we are doing it in a way that is as community and industry informed as possible. And so you're hearing it first on May 6th, a week from Monday. We are releasing what's called a request for information, which is an online survey that tackles everything from lenders to small business to people interested in working in the cannabis industry and asks questions related to what do you want to see, what is important, what are the barriers that you are encountering or think that you will encounter in entering the cannabis industry. We will then take all of that information and incorporate it into the programs themselves so that they are as impactful and directly beneficial to those who are entering the industry, especially those who qualify as social equity applicants, as they possibly can be. There is a significant, though relatively small amount of money appropriated to each of these programs. So there is $6 million appropriated to the Can Startup program, which offers loans to micro businesses, which are a particular type of retailer or dispensary business. Those can be for up to $50,000 per business or up to $150,000 if you have a private match. So if you have $150,000 of capital, you can get $150,000 from a loan through this program. Otherwise, you can get up to $50,000 with no need for a match. For the Can Navigate program, that is $2 million over the next couple of years. And that will go to organizations that can be nonprofits, that can be for-profits, who will help small business and entrepreneurs navigate all of the different elements, from how do you apply for a cannabis license to how do I get lending, how do I meet all of the regulatory burdens in terms of product safety, in terms of security and finance and banking related and insurance. All these different very complex elements that exist specifically within this industry, this grant is designed to provide support for. The Can Train grant, so the Workforce Development Program, has $4 million appropriated to it, $2 million this year and $2 million next year. And so so those will offer grants, as I mentioned, to nonprofits, for-profits that are going to provide the training programs to enter the workforce. This could be in cultivation, this could be in doing science related to testing, to manufacturing, and it will offer up to $20,000 per individual to enter and complete a training program. Those could be at a Minnesota State school. There's a number that are offering programs, or those could be through other types of organizations as well. Those $20,000 scholarships will be offered by a lottery. So it's not going to be individual by individual. It's going to be selected, and this is to maximize fairness in terms of who gets them. Can Grow is very similar. And again, this is an emphasis on folks who are already farming. And I know within the Hmong community, agriculture is very important, and there's some incredibly skilled farmers. And so this is a grant program that may, interest folks in this community and even more than maybe some others. And so again, we are working in collaboration with our partner agencies to get that one off the ground and make it as impactful as possible. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I have cards. I'll be here through the whole night. But again, I want to emphasize how important this request for information is that will be released a week from Monday. We'll work through Senator Her's office to make sure it gets to everybody, and that the responses that we receive to this survey are going to structure all of these programs. Marone mentioned rulemaking. This is basically what we are doing for each of these grant programs. We know what they are for, but in terms of how we focus them and how we ensure that this money goes to creating as much impact in your community and other communities as possible will be determined by what we hear on this survey, on the request for information. So with that, I can turn it over to Senator Her to provide clarity, and then my colleagues at the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you. Let me sum it up in Hmong just in case. Yeah, thank you, Nathan. So Nathan, ne have chọn ra luôn thì cho hạt đã một grant cho số lại nữa mua hạt cho loan thì giờ ta chỉ mới trả nhà họ mới khó lang lỗ để bố mua cái loan program này chỉ cho hàng cho ilu lang lỗ thằng đó giờ ta mới mua match để bố cản giải mới cho nhà cho mới lấy ipo chỉ cho hàng đó mà. And Nathan, are those forgivable loan or is it just straight loan?
Those are straight loans, but again, that is a question that we are going to work with. Many, I can't guarantee for this, but many of the loan programs we have a portion that is forgivable, and so that's something that we will explore, but that we don't have.
Okay. And my staff have a sheet of paper here just so that if you are okay to write your name and phone number, whatever information you give, so that when I receive information from the agency, I can direct forward the email to you, forward some information to you. Okay. Well, thank you. Now let's have our commissioner, Tom Peterson.
Well, thank you, Senator, and it's really an honor to be here tonight. And thank you all for coming out here on a Friday night, and it just shows the interest in this, and I appreciate the invitation from Senator Her. I've been able to work with him for many years. He actually served on the Agriculture Committee for many years and was a great partner. And he'd always talk about how much agriculture and how much farming there is in his area and how it's in the culture, as you've heard, and everything. And so we've tried to build programs in our department that support that. And so we, in supporting the work of the Office of Cannabis Management, I always want people in this room and others to know that we have lots of other loans and grants too. And I can share that link with you, but if you ever just go to our website or you Google Minnesota Department of Agriculture loans and grants, you'll get a list of about 35 different programs that might work for you where some of these other ones might not. We have things like a beginning, not that you need a loan, but a beginning farmer loan. We have a down payment assistance if you're looking to buy a farm. We have a beginning farmer tax credit if you're buying a farm from somebody else. We have also equipment grants. We do food grants through like Farm to School if you're a vegetable farmer or something selling to that. But I always want people to know about those things that we have. We also, as commissioner, started that an Office of Emerging Farmers, so that we're helping people that the average farmer in Minnesota, when you look at the majority, look like me, right? White, middle-aged, mid 50-year-old. I live in Pine City, is where my farm is. But Minnesota is changing a lot. Our demographics are changing, and so we want to be sure that we're serving all communities, that people that want to get into all types of farming. And so we have an office. So if you have questions and you just don't understand it or you need help, you can call that Emerging Farmer Office and they'll help you. And so I'll get that number and information to the senator. And one of the pieces, that the senator's been very, insistent on, and that's something that we're working on too, as our outreach to the Hmong community is very important. And so how do we, continue to work on that? And so I'm going to introduce if it's all right, Senator, I'm going to introduce Senator Senator Cordelay. Welcome. He's our manager,
Senator.
but he does all the work at the department on this issue. But I'm really here to listen, to hear your questions and your thoughts, because that really helps me and all of us do our jobs. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Senator Herr. Thank you all for having us. I also have done my time over here as an East Sider, living on both sides of Conway Recreational Center. So it's good to be here tonight and spend time with you. My name is Anthony Cordelet, and I oversee the hemp program, amongst one of the many programs I oversee, which we started back in 2014. And so we've had many Hmong farmers grow hemp in Minnesota already, and there are still a fair amount that are licensed to grow hemp in Minnesota, I'm happy to say. I want to clear up some information for that might be fairly confusing. What is cannabis? It's many things. You have a plant called cannabis sativa, and many people refer to it as cannabis. However, it has legal definitions now, and not only does it have legal definitions within the state of Minnesota that define it differently, it has a legal definition at the federal level. So there are words like marijuana, cannabis, adult use cannabis, and hemp. And what the heck are all those things? Well, they're all the same plant. So when I talk about the hemp program, and Office of Cannabis Management talks about the adult use program, we're talking about the same plant. The difference between those, and it's very important for you if you're going to get involved in this to understand what those differences are. Marijuana federally is the prohibited form of cannabis, okay? Adult use cannabis is now defined in Minnesota as cannabis. It is not legal federally. So for those of you that would get a license eventually to possess, 2 pounds or 2 ounces in your person, and you try to go across the Wisconsin border, that doesn't work. So the law works within the state of Minnesota. Hemp is defined both federally and within the state the same way. And what it is a designation of the cannabis plant that does not produce one cannabinoid, and I don't want to nerd out on all of you and use all these words, but cannabinoids are really what it's all about when it comes down to adult use cannabis. And the one I'm referring to is THC, is the acronym, tetrahydrocannabinol. Hemp is defined as 0.3% THC or less by dry weight, and adult use cannabis in Minnesota would be anything above that. At the federal level, anything above 0.3% THC is a Schedule 1 controlled substance, and it's a felony. Now that may change over time, but while we're still in this period of uncertainty at the federal level, it is important to understand those distinctions. You can grow hemp right now. You can grow hemp if you don't get an adult use license. And I'm not trying to pull you away or advertise for the program by any means, but I just want you to be aware that you can get involved in cannabis growing right now as long as you grow hemp. And like I said, many cannabis growers, or many Hmong growers, are doing that. And when I've talked with Hmong farmers, especially that have reached out to me about this new law, they seem to be confused that the only way you can grow cannabis is if you grow adult use. And many of them, when I've asked them, what products do you want to produce? It's had nothing to do with cannabinoids or anything to get you high or be in a brownie or a flower smoked or any of that. They have mentioned that their ancestors and their elders have grown hemp for fiber production. That is hemp. And so I just want to point that out because I want to make it clear, although it's probably confusing, but Senator Herr, I can't answer all the questions tonight, but I make it my commitment to work with you and this community as much as we have to. The other thing I want to say is a good friend of ours, Jim Erickson, is in the room. One way for you to learn about this, because hemp growing and adult use growing, if you're growing for cannabinoid production, are identical. Growing for fiber and grain is more of an outside endeavor, which most of you are probably familiar with. Growing adult use cannabis is going to really be focused on inside, and that's why, as Marone and has said, you know, there's a lot of need for capital in this business. But I would reach out to some of the organizations. Jim, can you help me? I know you guys changed your name. It's Cannabis.
Thank you, Tony. I'm the past chairman of the Minnesota Cannabis Co-op.
Yes.
Co-op is very important. So you could look up on your phone right now, mncannabis.coop, and you can see that group. If you are interested in getting in at the low level, being a member of the co-op, where you are an owner
Yeah.
of the business. So Tony and the commissioner have been very helpful to those of us who grew. I grew in 2020, so I have a little experience. I got started when Representative Zhang asked me to help the Hmong farmers
Yeah.
back in 2018. So I said, why not? Why don't I grow? And I grew a little bit. And I'll tell you about my experience if you want that later on. But MN Cannabis, mncannabis.coop. You might be interested in joining. It'd be an easy entryway, not very expensive, but you get a lot of folks who are in your shoes who want to be in the business. And that group is a good to be a member of, and the department and the new cannabis office will be very helpful. So happy to answer questions later on.
Thank you, Jim. And I would say the co-op is good because they have a lot of hemp growers that are going to move over into the adult use space, and they already know how to, I mean, they have setups for growing adult use cannabis already. Some of them are looking for partnerships, so, you know, that can always help you get started too. So it's well worth talking to them because they can tell you about the trials and tribulations they've had trying to start a cannabis farm. It's not as easy as everybody thinks or everybody makes it out to be. The other association I would look up is the Minnesota Industrial Hemp, not cooperative, Minnesota Industrial Hemp Association. David Ladd is in charge of that, and he represents some farmers and growers too that, again, are searching the same way you all are of, you know, how do I get involved in this, and what's it cost, and what kind of machinery do I need, and what type of, you know, agronomic, you know, ideas do I have to think about to make my crops successful. And you can certainly always reach out to us, and we're working closely with the Office of Cannabis Management too. So hopefully the confusion over what is hemp, marijuana, or adult use cannabis will get less and less as the years go on. So with that, I really want to leave time for questions and hear from you all, but I just wanted to introduce who we are. And if you want to find us, just put in Minnesota Hemp Program, and it'll bring you right to the MDA's Department of Ag's Hemp Program, and you'll have all our contact info.
Thank you, Anthony. So it's perfect timing. On our agenda, it says 6:30 is for Q&A, and so it's perfect. Yep, we're right on the dot here. I just want to sum up what you just say in Hmong. 做人佢俾判啲先呢，我哋已特個 website 當啦，哋透露你冇俾錄講好，俾錄講好咯，當然啦，有咩上幫子有咩叫你冇播錄講好咧，錄Office of Cannabis Management OCM， 嗱咩個 D 呢？咩個登到 D 的 D， the website is DED right？ DED， what's the website？ What you say？ Minnesota Deed, DEED and Minnesota, that will come out, your website. And then from the Department of Agriculture, mình Google, mình tạo được họ, tại vì mà sẽ bố cho grant nè, Commissioner 都係幫我就 grant 咗 beginning farmer, 冇人到就好啦，有咩就 B 路 farming 呢，你哋不然冇人到เขาคือ俾住ถูก包住ให้俾住 apply 就幫就 grant họ and คืออย่าแต่ไม่ apply จีต้านะแต่ไม่ต้องหาจุกูเป็นสัมเป็นหมัดลงกิจใจจุเขาคือผู้ยิงสังกัดเป็นจะต้นเหตุน้องมองเตาจาก grant เขาฮะนั่นนะแต่ฝิ่งเตาเป็นจะต้นเหตุจีโช apply จาก grant จาก grant เขาคือ commissioner หาจาก grant มาจีจะมีไอจีจะพังเลยจะนี่โปรพังจะเศร้าแล้วฮะในมัน level แต่ไม่ใช่หูจะไม่ qualify ไม่มา apply แต่กูต้องใช้เป็นจันจันลงนะ so now is question and answer timeไม่หมดเลยนะจีไม่ยิงไม่นูเป็นมาเตะเลยเป็นเตะต่อไม่จ้างเตะแต่ลูกไมโครโฟนเยอะลูกแบบไม่นะหาช่างแต่พอตั้งกูหาก็ไม่ชอมเบนะเราเตะกูไหลสีสาโอเคมอเอาไปไหลสีกูไหลสีสาแต่ไม่สั่งเตา information คือถ้าถือผมมอ deadline ที่ไหนนะแต่กูมาช่างแต่จุดไหม go ahead your question
I'm going to ask my questions and then I will do English first and then I will do Hmong as well so that we don't have a repetitive questions, okay? First of all, I want to thank the state legislature, particularly Senator Port and those who helped author the bill for the cannabis bill that is happening here in the state of Minnesota. I also want to thank the leadership that makes this happen. My question for you is probably more like equity, more diversity, and fairness. Now, I know that you have created a board to oversee the policies and procedures that you are developing. I haven't seen any Hmong representatives sitting there, and we have the state of Minnesota has the largest Hmong population, and many of whom are hemp and cannabis growers in other states. They invested money in other states, and many of whom are farmers. You know, the first generation hasn't gone, so they still have the skills necessary. They have now the knowledge, but when you are deciding, you're making decision without them, without having representation on the decision-making level. Besides, the staff, what I don't want to see is, I don't want to see the decision makers are not any Hmong. And then you have the outreach worker who is a Hmong, who has nothing, no decision at all. But because you want diversity on the staff, then you have to hire a Hmong person. I don't want to see that happen, okay? And I want to say that loud and clear at this level, because it's important for us as a community to be able to trust the government that we live in and that we praise.
Yep. And so can you go directly to your question? And I think that's
a
very good point. And you know, I'm sure we'll take that in and we'll figure it out in our agency. But
yeah. So my question for you is, how, besides coming out to here, how are you reaching out to our community? Number one, you talk about grants and programs. A lot of time, so I have been on your side of the table. A lot of time, grants and programs are given to agency that hires someone who does nothing but sit there all day, think about how to write a good proposal. And by the time the money gets to us, there's nothing left. So my question for you is, how are you going to diversify that so that my community gets the same thing?
And making sure that we really are being very intentional about ensuring that the right, that people from all walks of life, from different communities, people with so much expertise are entering into those spaces. And I think with our office, we aren't necessarily the ones that oversee who ends up being on that advisory council. However, we do help coordinate the advisory council. And so I know, if I'm not mistaken, there's a few positions that are still, seats that are still open on that. And so I could say for myself as like an outreach director, we'll still make that commitment to ensuring that we are sharing that widely and that we are making sure that that representation is there. However, I just want to make sure that the distinction is there as well, that we aren't the ones that necessarily oversee who ends up on that council or what that process exactly looks like. However, we will kind of essentially coordinate some of those spaces. When it comes to hiring, though. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Do you think so? Okay.
My question to you is there any limitation of quantity of license to grow marijuana? And then what are the qualifications to get the license? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so that question, I'll start with, there are several, I think over a dozen license types that are included in the legislation. And so there are separate license types for folks who would like to sell, so a retail license type and a manufacturer license type. And then there are 3 license types that allow for cultivation. There is, and I will say that it's going to sound complicated of like, why not just all one? But really the intent of that is to allow for different entry points into the market and to really have folks focused on the piece of the supply chain that they can excel at, and that it is then a multi business operation, and that it prevents some of the things that may happen of a really large company coming in and taking over from top to bottom the supply chain and not really leaving room for folks who maybe are focused on more of the smaller business side thing. So the distinction between license types helps that. And so there are, like I said, there are 3 license types that allow for cultivation. The first is a cultivation license, and that's a bulk cultivation license that allows for 30,000 square feet of canopy for indoor grow, and then outdoor grow, Tony may catch me on how many acres that translates to. And then there is the medium-sized license, the mezzo, which allows for 15,000 square feet indoor and the separate for outdoor. And the distinction between the large canopy and then the 15,000 and then the smallest one at 5,000 is the 15,000 and the 5,000, the mezzo and the micro, the medium and the small. Those 2 license types are actually the ones that you can also manufacture and sell. So they're and we call it the like vertically integrated type. So it allows you to have a small grow and one retail shop, for example. And the legislation gets pretty detailed like that in terms of that, but we're working on visuals that help distinguish between those license types that will be available. So for example, for that smallest level of growing at 5,000 feet indoor and an equivalent outdoor, and then being able to manufacture and sell within your own company, we are looking at that license type. I think there's a lot of interest based on feedback we've received in that license type. And so to your question on limits on license types, folks would only be able to hold one of those license types. So you would not be able to do a large-scale cultivation and a retail. And that is in the intent of trying to limit large companies coming in and dictating the market and ensuring that we do have room for small businesses. And so as we open up the market, we have proposed a limit, or caps as we call them, on the initial phase of that social equity track as we get opened, just to prevent some risks we see in other states. Is if we do too many licenses, it also has the risk of oversaturation of the market. So too much supply hurts folks' ability to sell at good prices, and also the risk of diversion. And so that would be sales of, or if we have too much product and nobody can sell it in a legal way, then it diverts into sort of the illicit market, and we want to prevent that. So it's capped on the front end as we enter, but then moving into market launch in general, we are proposing a limit on the largest cultivation limits, that 30,000 foot, and the medium one, but not a limit on the small 5,000 square feet one that can also. So that was a lot of detail, and happy to follow up with in writing of the distinction between those license types. But it's a good question because we limit on the front end and then limit a few on the general, but then there's also license types for delivery services or transporter services and wholesale license. So there's various entry points, and those we do not propose limits on once it launches, because those are important pieces of the supply chain that we want folks to have access to.
And I would just add to it too, from the hemp perspective, to grow hemp you also need a license, and you would get that through us. There's no caps. Anybody can get a license. It does have a fee. And we open our licensing in November, and we close it. Actually, it's closing on the 30th, on Tuesday. We have to do that because we have to report all the farms to USDA, because hemp is open to crop insurance, just like any other commodity. You may find as this develops, Sophie mentioned, capping licenses on the adult use side because of protecting the marketplace from overproduction and things like that. Hemp is going to be kind of unique because we need thousands of acres, for example, a year just to make fiber plants viable, right, for manufacturing fiber products. So as an adult use grower, you can also have a hemp license. You can't what we call commingle your lots. Your hemp has to be separate from your adult use, but you can do it. And you may find that there's years where there is overproduction in the adult use market, or there's overproduction in the hemp market, and it's not worth growing one or the other, and you can get into the other market by getting a license for that. So I just wanted to add that too.
Yep. Cô cho hành cho lục cô ta sĩ của Thái Minh Chí này là giờ ta mới cho tao ban tao chế nó chỉ một limit là chỉ một license rồi mới cho gì cho là tên là chỉ một license giờ mới dùng một cho chỉ bộ chỉ pan square feet nó tên họ nói cho nên hành chỉ một limit ha thằng đó họ cứ license fee để giờ application giờ chỉ bộ đô la họ giờ mới một cho cứ cầu chỉ square feet là để cho họ nó mộtตัว number làใช่โซเฟียนชาตัว number นี่มาค่ะไม่ท่องได้จะไปเจ้า square feet แต่นี่มันตัว number เลยเขาจะเลยจะชี้ผ่าน square feet จากการลงเราแต่นี่จะตัดช่วงไปจิตต้องมองขาแต่ตัวมอปูไปจัดไหล number แต่ยังเคยหลังพอ and do we have the number of the limits?
So once we launch the market and really, like Marone mentioned, the rulemaking process, that is sort of the linchpin of what we are waiting for to launch the market, because we do want good rules in place that are informed by experts and subject matter experts, and so we're working through that process, and then we'll launch. And so we have cultivator licenses, so that largest 30,000 foot indoor limit, and it is only grow. Proposed 25 licenses for social equity applicants and 25 licenses for general. And so that is, and by general I mean non-social equity applicants. So 50 total with the split down 50-50. So reserving space for social equity applicants is an important piece of this. At the manufacturer license, which is that just manufacturing, 12 and 12, so a similar 50 split, and then mezzo, which is the middle grow plus you can sell and manufacture your own, is 12 and 22 and 22, so 44. And then retailers which would allow for up to 5 locations, but just selling, no growing, at 100 and 100, so 200. And so that's like once we open, but there will already be the social equity folks moving through that sort of pre-approval track, if that makes sense. And the rest of license types, we don't propose caps on because we are not worried about the oversaturation, overproduction piece on these other license types.
Next question.
All right, I got questions that probably either the Office of Cannabis could answer or Commissioner Peterson and Tony could answer from MDA point of view. I work with a lot of elders, and some of them have raw land, and the question is, they ask is that how do they prepare, are there any prerequisite preparation to the land in terms of either county or state certification so the land to be tillable or farmable? So are there any pre-requirement? And then the follow-up to probably Tony is for the hemp. As you alluded to, one of your Hmong colleagues shared with you that, yeah, we do have a deep and long history of harvesting hemp for fiber. And not many knew about the seed base. And I think I worked briefly with MDA before, so I knew a little bit about how that started. And are we still having the challenge of having adequate machinery to harvest the seed? Some of the elders also want to know, and also the land certification piece, that do we need that? So welcome all of you to the east side, by the way. Thank you.
There's 2 questions there.
Thank you. I'll try to tackle both. First, I'll start with your second one, and then Tom, I'll probably forget the first one if you could remind me. Yes, there are some challenges for machinery in harvesting both grain and fiber. There are some specific things that make it or types of machinery that make it a lot easier than other types. From the grain perspective, we've seen a lot of farmers be able to easily retrofit some of mostly their soybean harvesting equipment to easily get grain off of the plant. I think the biggest challenge with all harvesting of hemp is that it's fibrous, period. Whether you're cutting it for fiber or you're cutting it or you're harvesting it for grain. And that wrapping and binding around machinery, it starts fires, if you're going too fast, there's a whole learning curve with that. And that's why I suggested earlier, it is a benefit before you get into it, if you're gonna go the full machinery route, to really talk to somebody. There's plenty of farmers around, even the East Metro here that you could talk to that can show you their implements, and they're generally friendly and want to see hemp succeed. So from that standpoint, there are challenges, but the machinery, there are some custom machinery now that is coming out for hemp purposes specifically, now that we're 10 years down the road. In terms of prepping the land, it's not a lot different than a lot of other crops. I'm going to use corn as an example because it's very similar to corn. Cannabis in general, when it's grown outside, it needs a lot of moisture early on to get the seed and the seedling development. But then the benefit of it is, and especially with the way our summers have been going with droughts, over the last couple years, it doesn't need as much water once it starts to get to that mid-development stage. But it does need a lot of nitrogen input or good fertilizer, and you want to make sure that your soil is healthy, as you would for probably what a lot of you are doing with your other specialty crops and vegetables and commodity crops too. In terms of applying, I know that you do have to connect with your local units of government to get, at least on the adult use side. For hemp, you do not. It is federally legal commodity, just like corn or soybeans. Although you have to get a license for it from us, you do not have to get any special permission. As long as that land is zoned for agriculture, you're good to go. And so I would think most of the land that I've seen or even around the metro where folks have 1 acre to 10 acre plots and things like that would fit the bill because they're zoned ag. If it's not zoned ag, it gets a little more complicated, but the only exception hemp has is you can't grow it in a residential dwelling, but we have had people grow it in their backyards. I don't recommend that. It doesn't make neighbors happy, but it's technically legal. I don't know if you guys want to touch on like any of the other things they have to do for licensing for an adult use.
Yeah, I'll go quick, and I think, and thanks Tony, because it's an important piece. So for adult use licensing, once we open that application process, the law last year also calls for an important partnership with our local cities and counties. And so as a requirement for licensure, it does require being in compliance with local zoning laws and having that confirmed by the local government. And so that is for cannabis businesses, both including those growing, selling, and manufacturing. And then an additional piece for if you are the retail license, so selling, or you are the micro or mezzo selling, a retail registration is also required with the local city. And so that has to be coordinated on that end. And so we are, as the state, making sure that happens, but that is on the applicants and potential licensees' sort of responsibility and role of having those conversations there and working to meet zoning compliance. And I will say a piece of this too requires local governments to get local ordinances in place that account for something that is federally illegal and has not yet been legal in the state up until now. And so a cannabis business is likely not included in their local zoning laws or their how they're doing it. So we are having conversations with local partners about that. I think like many cities, they all do differently wherever you go, and so that also kind of depends on the city itself of how far along they are in that development or where they will zone it. So that's a piece too. But yeah, that is falls a little bit less on what we are able to control as the state and more so on the applicant and the local government in terms of those conversations.
2 questions. North Wall and then West Wall.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, Senator Port spoke eloquently about commuter equitable. My question is that I've not heard you guys spoke about the financial aspects of being in the cannabis business, because I know that the financial institution treats the cannabis business differently, and being part of the community and being involved in that, and also being part of the community, but a community of color. I haven't heard about the financial institution, how they're going to treat community of color being involved in this business. So I just want to hear whoever can take this question, but I would like to hear from you guys, particularly in this business, because it gets pretty difficult. So I just want all the community here to understand where you guys stand and what's your partnership or what's your relationship with the financial institution and how they're going to treat this business, given that we are a community of color. We're going to somehow, some shape or form, participate in this business. So I just, anyway, and I'll be able to welcome to the East Side, St. Paul, okay?
Hey, thank you, and I'll start and then I'll pass it down to you guys. I will say this, if you're going to get involved, regardless of color or community, if you're going to get involved in cannabis, banking is a challenge. We've dealt with this with a federally legal commodity in hemp, where farmers still have a difficult time securing loans and getting banking. Now it's getting better, but banks are going to hedge risk, and they do not like when something is federally illegal because they are backed generally by federal insurance. And so that has been a big issue, and it's just flat out because there's still this controlled substance oversight over marijuana. In terms of, there are banks around that will give you loans certainly for hemp. They're willing to take that risk now because they're getting more familiar with it. I haven't heard any issues with at least on the hemp side of things, with communities of color not getting loans and things like that. And if you do run into that on the hemp side, call us because we can help facilitate that. But I'd be interested, maybe Sophie or Marone, you could address that on the adult youth.
Well, I can just start off by saying that, like, I think we also acknowledge that as like a very large concern, and I'm glad that you also raised that. We all recognize that, like, it is very capital intensive getting into this, and we know historically the challenges that a lot of people of color face with banks and the banking system in general. And so that is something that we're making sure that, like, we're also calling out for folks as they're entering into this industry or considering it, is that these are very real considerations to make. Our office is kind of having conversations with folks that are, I'd say, potentially warming up to the idea and thinking about, you know, whether there's like an appetite from various institutions to participate in this, but very much so, like Tony mentioned, that risk is very much so there, and anything that is federally illegal puts, just like that, makes it even a bit more difficult for folks to navigate. And so I think that it's consistently a conversation that we have folks from our office trying to navigate and figure out what are those various loopholes, or what are the support systems that are available to communities that want to enter into this. And very real considerations that people should have, I'd say, on the front end.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I appreciate that question because it's spot on, and I think it's a difficult piece of this and something that I don't think we have an exact solution for, given the complexity with it being federally illegal still. But I will say we as Marone said, stand ready to engage in conversations about working around that. I think it's a space, and you know, Senator Herr probably has experience too of where state government can't solve it. There's a lot of other partners that we can bring to the table and get creative and bring other folks to the table. So we stand ready to be a thought partner in that, or if we can be a helpful information sharing in that, to think about other options and third-party folks outside of government.
Thank you. I know that it's very difficult if you guys don't bring these institutions to the table and find a way, because I know that from just engaging with other states, because just illegality from the federal level is very difficult. Banks they don't have nothing to do with it. So I just it'd be a partnership wise for them to come to the table if you guys were able to do something like that.
And I'll look into that too. So thank you.
Okay, I got a question for the middle guy in there. You're saying that there were programs that are gonna train people how to grow it, right? So if I were to run a production, do they gonna teach me how to market it? How to market cannabis stuff, right? So are they gonna help me market it? Yeah, that's my question.
So that's an excellent question. The Can Navigate grants will go to, again, organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, that will provide training to entrepreneurs and small business owners. As I mentioned, there's $2 million in that grant program, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you start spreading it out over the many different areas that business owners will need in order to succeed in this industry, it actually is a small amount of money. And so, again, we are going to try and focus that funding as much as possible. So if marketing is something that is important to you, again, we will send out this request for information, but please fill it out and note that, because that will inform how we structure the program and where we focus the funds. I would also emphasize at the Department of Employment and Economic Development, we have a wide range of services available to any business owner, including those who are entering the legal cannabis industry, to support their success, including access to providers who can help support marketing strategy and development, such as the small business development centers, which are located across the state. if you're interested, I have a card. I'd be happy to help connect you to those.
Yeah, so, you're good? Okay, yeah, so I have a quick question for you guys. When are we gonna start applying for the licenses? And then, I seen a lot of CBD stores and THC stuff, right? But the thing is, are they gonna get converted into retails too, or how does that go about? Thank you.
Great questions. I'll start with the first one on the timeline. And so, like I mentioned, we are in the rule-making process of standing up the industry, and it is something we want to take seriously because of the necessary rules here, and also something that we want to get right from the front. And so we are, it is a pretty arduous process. Our rule-making process in Minnesota is maybe Senator Hurd knows this too, in comparison to other states, there's many steps involved, and it's for good reason, so it's done right. But we, as an agency, will work with the revisor's office and then the Office of Administrative Hearing. And so those are just two other entities too that make us go through this additional steps in the process. So we are on track for our timeline of finishing rules in early 2025. And so in early 2025 is when our rules, knock on all the wood, will be in a good spot, and then we would be able to open for licensing, applications for licensing. And like I said, the application process does involve multiple steps, and so it is, not a 1 week turnaround in that way, but that's when we would be able to open for applications. And I will say what our recommendation does, that is in front of the legislature right now, would be to open up for applications for the social equity applicant track in the pre-approval track. We would hopefully want to open this summer for that application process, but the note I will make about that is our current proposal of moving folks through that social equity pre-approval track is until we have our rules, folks won't be able to open their doors for business, but instead go through the process of securing the property, working on local approval, getting the applications in, and doing all that stuff to get business in order. And yes. Not right now, not right now. And we would, not right now. And so we would aim for this summer for social equity applicants. And I will say that is dependent on the bill passing. So that piece is dependent on the bill passing. If it does not, we would not be able to open this summer. But the track of rulemaking being done in early 2025 is the timeline no matter what. And so we will aim for that. And that would be then when all folks can open their doors, because we can't have folks opening their doors until we have those rules in place so that we're all operating under the same standards. And then your second question was about the low dose. Yeah, so right now in Minnesota, we do have the lower dose market, and so it is hemp-derived THC. We're pretty unique. We're like the only state who did it sort of that way. We have THC products on the shelves right now that are legal if they follow Tony's very scientific definition of what lower dose is, but they do have intoxicating effects in the lower dose way. So those products are legal right now. It's legal to sell as long as you are registered with the Department of Health. So as the Office of Cannabis Management, they gave us a little bit of time to stand up before they gave us lower dose, but we will take over the lower dose industry as well. And so we will be both regulating the lower dose industry as it will continue. It's an important market here in Minnesota, and then also the adult use. And so those retailers, as long as you're registered with either Department of Health or when it's us with the Office of Cannabis Management, when we open for licensure for lower dose, we are proposing in our bill, and we're really hopeful we get it because we think it's important, is a mechanism to convert current registrants in the lower dose space to a comparable lower dose license. And we wouldn't have a cap on those. We would have as many lower dose folks as you need. And so it would still require you to apply to get into our licensing system, but as long as you apply and are registered and in good standing, you'd be able to keep operating until the license is good. So we want that mechanism, because I think there's over 3,800 folks selling lower dose. No. No, that is not okay, and I don't know if Tony has the scientific one on that. That because he's talking about raw flour of the flour that likely is the if it's testing higher than 0.03%, it is cannabis, and until folks have licenses to sell cannabis that is not lower dose, it is not legal. If that distinction works, yeah.
Next question. Okay. Yeah. So thank you. We're gonna go with this is the last question, but we will reserve time so we can network and you can come and pick a business card, ask your question directly to these individuals. They are expert in their own field, and so we're gonna have this the next person, Bill, to ask your next question or is it comment?
Thank you. Is my mic on? I guess it is. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to the east side of St. Paul, where I grew up, and we're all immigrants from Poland and Finland and everywhere else at that time. But thank you, and welcome to everybody as well. I have a couple of questions. First of all, why so few licenses to sell? I mean, there's such a demand out there. Why so few licenses? It's 100 or 150?
For retail?
Retail, yeah.
Yeah, and so I should note that the micro and the meso can also sell. So
Okay.
those are the caps on only the retail license, and so seemingly the micros, which will not be capped, we can do as many micros as folks want, will also have retail locations, and same with some folks in the meso space. So that is part of the calculation, those license types will also have retail locations. And so this is also, I should also note, these are the numbers in which we think we should start with before and then once we have market data, what we also have recommended in the legislature is the ability to adjust those caps and those numbers after a 2-year period once we figure out, let the market a little bit. And I think what just realistically what you see in other states too is upon launch, it's the market figuring itself out, people are getting set up, and then it develops and changes over the time as you try to move this industry up and as it matures.
Well, I can appreciate that. You have to start someplace, and I guess that's what you're saying. But my second question then basically is, then why do you expand that, and why do local units of government get an opportunity to get into the cannabis business? Like a local liquor store. I mean, we're all trying to get communities and equity and everything else going, and yet the law allows local units of government to set up their own cannabis store and compete with everybody else.
Yeah, that is a great question. That is was part of last year's legislation, and so I cannot speak for the authors of last year's bill on that because I did not draft it. But that is included last year. Yeah.
So if Maplewood wants to get into business, we would be competing with the city of Maplewood if they wanted to get into the cannabis business. And do they have access to the early licenses, local governments?
Not in our current proposal. Not in our current proposal, no. And so there's also in last year's bill a requirement that local governments allow for every 12,500 people, there needs to be a retail location, and so seemingly cannot prohibit a retail location if they do not meet that requirement. So it would be, and I think in last year's bill, it allows local governments to apply for the specific retail license. They would not be allowed to apply for other license types. It is under the retail section, and so they would, in our proposal, as we've put forward in legislation, go through the same application process. And then I think in the House version that passed, it's a bit different now. So we will see where it goes.
I don't want to complicate the matters, but the city of Maplewood, for example, has a population of 36,000. Do they get the 3 licenses? Do they stop anybody else from coming in?
That is a great question.
That's the concern. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that we are totally hear that concern, and I think I do not want to go too far into a what-if scenario because I think it also depends on what the local government has set up for how many licenses they are seeking, and different local governments will do it differently. And it also I think also depends on where social equity applicants, if they move through our pre-approval process, are setting up versus when general licensing opens. So I absolutely hear your concern. I do not want it all sound like I just think at this point I just can't answer beyond some things that depend on a lot of others.
All right, thank you.
Well, and you have my ear too. Thank you for bringing that up, and we'll work to improve the legislation as we go forward. I know that this initiative has been boiling up over the years, and legislation take the leadership. Legislation like Senator Port take the leadership. Now we have an agency that will implement the tasks, and they're looking to it as well, and maybe even provide feedback to the legislature how we can improve. So we got a lot of work to do ahead of us, and I want to thank you all for being here. We reserved that pretty much we had this gym up until 8 o'clock, so we reserved the time so you can network, you can get their business card, call them directly if you have specific concern. The reason we call this meeting, we organize this meeting because I want us to kind of be ahead of the game. Actually, ahead meaning we are late already. We still want to work on diversify, our representation. There's still going to be task force that the agency will be creating, and that will need your involvement. And I'm sure they'll be more conscientious about getting people of your generation too. My generation, your generation is much the same, and even when let's see. Anthony was talking about cannabis noise, right? So I'm in legislation. I'm still have trouble getting that term going back and forth. So we really need some people in our community, and I'm sure as we go forward, the nonprofit will be empowered as they will receive grant to educate and walk our community through. But there are also opportunities. You are entrepreneur. You like to take valid shortcut into things. You don't want to be trained and take a whole 2 years to be trained how to do it. You want to get to the chase. And I understand your nature of business too. And I'll switch into Hmong, but I want to thank all of you. Stick around and connect with the community so that we could get them engaged. And really appreciate the legislation led by Senator Port. To make sure that we have 25, that's 50% for community with social equity or social inequity, depending on how you define, so that we could have the opportunity. So I'm a switch in Hmong. 我讲到佢咩多呢？比如受學no是嘛？比如因為 plot 就只係填字，係咩移民就波談下個波包下有咩冇路啦，只咩知道到啦，但咩都睇波咩。冇不就是當咩好開始播咩冇做好 website 做人哋有 website 啦但是啲咗你可營銷內容或者咗哋省就研究研究啲咩好做播談嘅播埋啲啲咩移民好咧專啲哋播應來依家同網絡做有做好係咩招呼哋中國俾注目學嘅省要學幫助呢我哋播下住查就網絡後嚟做好嚇呢哋估計有西種就共紅咯個我後嚟轉咗做咩做咩從สุด通到做嚟估俾隻咁มั่งคือ organize 個 meeting 嚟คือจะไม่ตัว是俾ตัว經常面住啦ฮะช่างแต่ขอหลาย license คือยกให้哋俾整幫做能夠知別แต่俾整做注ใจ嘛都注ใจคือ legalize 嘛ยิ่งเข้าแล้ว要做俾 state เนาะ是嘛cho hậu lử cứ yo ô cho sinh thành cứ mi ai na để nó để cho cứ mi ai na để lúc còn nó chuyện lúc sai cho cứ sĩ khu thằng đó giờ ta lúc summer nó giờ mấy giờ cho tôi này phải chờ mấy mua cái nhớ cho khuôn chọn nhẹ mấy sáng apply cho license nó để cứ bây giờ khi lúc họ trong họ cho lúc chạy tu sung nó này cũng mà chắc tạo cho mấy xong rồi tu cứ ít bù mong kiểm tra ít bù mong cứอย่างเลยโตเก็บแบบเม่งรุ่นเดียวขอคือจะมั่งเนาะกูปู่มองจี้เก็บตอนนี้รุ่นเดียวขอจะมั่งเนาะฮะกูปู่จะมองโจโอคลาโฮมาแคลิฟอร์เนียเขาจะการรุ่นเจ๊แต่จะป้องยาแต่จะจีนชาติอย่างต่างเด็กกูจะชาติเป็นรุ่นสเตย์โอขอคือเก็บใจรุ่นย่างใจรุ่นปังเป็นส่วนสุดตัวกูเป็นหมดจี้จะ%แฝงโจ%คือโยไม่ส่วนสุดตัวนะคือกูหมดแฝงโจเนี่ยจะหูกุญแจตา你有最後一個用語咯，就มั่งนะ有最後一個用語，還有最後一個到呢用語，沒叫我後裡面已經包了，但是佢加上但係幾個%的，沒從你手動了呢，有 càng tao cho khỏi business nó hay cho về mong luôn nên luôn khứ nhà cứ cha nó mới câu chuyện gì vậy giờ này cứ sẽ lấy mang ô họ nó ra là người ra nó để cứ chuyện của bây giờ cứ bút thành cứ mong thành chủ của organize cứ ô ilu công trình của rong ha khó ha lên đó của cho sang lên support cái này to nó mấy bộ này to này lỗ lấy của này giao của này cậu chỉ xong thì nên chỉnh chế tụ bằng là lấy tụ này lầu vì như vậy ít cứ有时间到哈啦，就可能每个毛就在那在那个用的对多人的在那多指标呢，就可能帮助做在那都看就可能的哈那个就คือ有网เขาคือ希望呢有帮助那那哈那这被我哋做上不了，可能等你有一度包场，估计有一度个鸟湖诶，supply 个主播播可能是是三十数趴了个那关注个。support 我好了，做可能唱的represent 什么打棒了，你只要就 chair 做单个老对哈，คือหรือโน้เป็นมาจะหาโลหะตัวเป็นมาขาดจนไม่好包查给帮助的不哈，แต่我讲到呢，我讲到某些人我做个呀做咩做不谈。